There was a long-lost game from Crash Bandicoot's past that never made it to the light of day. Let's talk about it.
No!
What's up, guys? Canadian Guy here, and I am back with a video that I have felt passionate about doing. Now, I normally talk about old games and upcoming remakes, but today I wanted to do something a little different. As we know, Crash has gone through a few iterations through the years. His original polygonal look, the overly smooth and thinned out look, the tattoo look, the realistic jorts, but there was one game that I had heard people talk about very subtly, and that caught my interest. See, I was hunting information for a video talking about why I was so excited for the next Crash game, and when I stumbled upon a canceled game from the past, I started to read as much as I could. So without further ado, let's take a dive into the video. Universal Interactive had owned the rights of Crash Bandicoot. Though Naughty Dog had created the character, the way second and third party developing works, it can be confusing to some people, and it can be hard to track sometimes. But after Naughty Dog left for Sony to make Jak and Daxter, the Crash IP kind of went into an abyss of confusion by being bounced around to different developers like Eurocom, Traveler's Tales, Vicarious Visions, before the Insane Trilogy of course, until eventually Universal merged with Vivendi, I forget how to pronounce it, and finally landing in the hands of Radical Entertainment. Now, Radical led the way on 3 Crash titles: Crash Tag Team Racing, Crash of the Titans, and Crash Mind Over Mutant. As many fans noticed, Crash seemed to be veering quite far away from its original conception and started to become unrecognizable. So when Mind Over Mutant came out, Radical Entertainment began developing a brand new Crash Bandicoot game, and in a sense, a complete reboot. No game was announced or released in 2009. That was because Radical had 2 projects currently in the works. It was Prototype and the upcoming new Crash game, Crash Landed. Now, there was technically 2 names for the project: I Am Crash Bandicoot, a reference to I Am Legend, and Crash Landed. But from what we have seen, the more accepted name was Crash Landed. So, as I had said, this was supposed to be a reboot of the Crash story, an origin per se. Now, from what I gathered, here was the essential story of the game. I may get a few details wrong here, but this is what I got overall. Crash was a regular Bandicoot at one point. In this game, they called them Bandicoots. After being captured and mutated by Dr. Cortex, Crash escaped from his experiments and lived a life on his own. However, Cortex and his right-hand henchman Dingodile are now trying to collect more Bandicoots for more experiments. Now, Dingodile had a tendency to harass these little Bandicoots for his own entertainment, but Crash saves them from their experiments or Dingodile's antics. The whole purpose of the game was to save these unmutated Bandicoots through the levels as you complete them. It was not quite as open world as Twinsanity, and seemingly reintroduced more linear moments akin to the original games while still trying to be open world. Though some old aspects did come back, there were many different mechanics that were introduced that were quite interesting. One of those was making and combining weapons, like finding a frog and an empty plastic bottle could create the Frog Zuka, which allowed you to reel items into Crash and were used for other uses as well. Other items like the Dragonfly jetpacks were also talked about. The game was going to feature a day and night cycle, and according to Crashmania, they believe that the more powerful and dangerous creatures would come out in the night cycle. There would also be weather cycles like sunny or rainy that may affect the gameplay. And to be honest, these were interesting and new mechanics for Crash Bandicoot. The game's engine that was being used at the time was really intriguing and allowed a high-end cartoony look that was never before seen in the Crash universe and had a lot of uniqueness to it. The game was set to release in 2010 for Xbox 360, PS3, then for it to be ported to the Wii, and then there were plans for a DS version to come out. A company called Renegade Kid applied to be the developer for the DS version and actually had a full 3D test demo created. Now, this is actually likely the only gameplay of Crash Landed we will actually see, because other than animation tests, no gameplay was actually shown. which actually might lead to its fate. Press kits were started to be put together for the media by an agency in Canada. At the time, they used the other project name, I Am Crash Bandicoot, and even featured a partnership with McDonald's, having maps that would describe different areas of the Wumpa Islands with coupon codes for burgers. There was even a suggestion that a Wumpa Burger promo was a possibility through McDonald's. It seemed that they were firing everything they had to make sure to try to get Crash Bandicoot back in the limelight he once was in. To even push the reboot further, there was even a spin-off racing game akin to the original Crash Team Racing that was being developed by High Impact Games that was going to use the assets from this game to create an entirely new kart racer. And this is where we got the image of the land shark from, and good golly, I'm happy we have nitro fueled. The game was seemingly starting to come together really nicely. The concept was clear, the story was solid, mechanics seemed to be figured out, and music was composed for it. It just seemed like everything was coming together so nicely. But what happened? Well, let's get to what is factual, and then we can talk about things that were heard through the grapevine and rumors. In 2008, Vivendi was purchased by Activision, which was when the game went into development. The slated release date for the game was 2010. However, due to restructuring and layoffs within Activision, the project was canceled. While the Crash games were developed, Prototype was the other project that was being worked on. The first game released in 2009 and was met with positive reception overall. Radical then focused everything they had on Prototype 2, which was their biggest project to date. The sequel launched with overall positive reception, but failed miserably when it came to the commercial market. It was predicted that Prototype 2 sold under 1 million copies in its first 2 months of sales. Then in June of that year, due to the commercial flop of Prototype 2, more mass layoffs happened at Radical, leaving just enough staff to work as a support team for Activision's projects. Prototype 2 was the last game that Radical had led the development on. So that is what we know for sure, but there are many anonymous comments from previous Radical employees giving insight on what happened. Now, of course, this is stuff coming from different sources, from different points of view, and have different opinions on who's to blame. So there will be different overall looks on what happened. So some of this should be taken with a grain of salt. Crash Mania reported that the project was killed in 2010 because after 2 years of development, though there was a crazy amount of concept art and ideas, in terms of actual legitimate gameplay, they seemed to be extremely behind. And the fact that the game was due to release that year, but with little to no gameplay, Activision may just cut their losses and ended the project when the 2010 restructuring came along. But there were more details released from multiple sources, as I was literally recording this video, so the timing was pretty good. But it was revealed that the game was given a 2-year development due to Mind Over Mutant's overall quality. But the lead designers and the visionaries on this new Crash reboot had left the project 1 year into its development. When they left, the team just didn't really know what to do with the project, so the game went through essentially development hell and they decided to scrap the whole project and start from scratch 1 year before the slated launch date. The new project was no longer I Am Crash Bandicoot or Crash Landed, but now is called Crash of the Bandicoots. But the problem was that even when they hit the restart button, they still had no lead designer. Once they actually got their hands on one, however, Crash the Bandicoots was coming close to its slated launch date, and the team was just scraping together a game as best as they could. But when Activision came to review the game was only 4 hours long end to end. The mismanagement of the project was completely on the fault of Radical, and Activision decided to cut the project due to its poor quality. So this concludes the end of what could have been the future of Crash Bandicoot. Though this neat project had a saddening end, there is a bit of a silver lining to all this. The first is that if this game did come out and did do well, maybe the Insane trilogy would not have been made. but also Radical Entertainment is still technically functioning. How many people are employed? How much are they supporting Activision? I really have no idea. But technically speaking, those ideas and concept art pieces do belong to Activision. Perhaps some of the shining ideas that Radical Entertainment had could be translated to the new Crash game. Maybe even Radical could help Vicarious Visions. Who knows? But that is what we know about the Cancelled Crash game. Crash landed. I'd like to thank Jump Button at JumpButtonCB on Twitter, who helped review this video to make sure all my info was kosher, along with helping me with actually finding some of this info, along with HP Zoner, who runs the Crash Mania site that had a slew of information and pictures. You can check the site out in the description below. But is there any other canceled game that you'd like me to investigate? Comment below and let me know. A huge thank you to all those who support the channel through Patreon and being a sponsor on the channel. If you'd like to help it out, check out the links in the description below, where you can buy some CGE merch or become a Patreon. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming and nostalgic content. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you guys in the next video.